Justin Gaethje has slammed the door on any chance of a rematch with Ilia Topuria. After beating him in the main event of UFC Freedom 250, he claimed the belt, branded Topuria a quitter, and now the entire lightweight division is choosing sides. So let's break down exactly what happened on the night Justin Gaethje walked onto the White House South Lawn and took it all. On the South Lawn of the White House, the American underdog stunned the world by making lightweight champion Ilia Topuria quit on his stool. Nobody saw this coming at UFC Freedom 250. Topuria entered the octagon as the overwhelming favorite. Gaethje was given odds of roughly 4.5 to 1 against him. The undefeated Spaniard carried 85% of the implied betting probability. CBS Sports panel of experts leaned almost entirely toward Topuria. Sports Illustrated staff predictions matched that lean. MMA Mania's preview even called for the fight to end inside 2 rounds. On paper, this was never meant to be close. It was billed as a changing of the guard, a king defending his crown against a man most had already counted out. Then the bell rang. Gaethje managed to land a few early jabs, but Topuria's superior hand speed was clear right from the start. It didn't take long before the two men were trading in a chaotic, unpredictable first round. Topuria opened the fight with the same sharp, precise boxing that had taken apart Alexander Volkanovski, worn down Max Holloway, and put Charles Oliveira to sleep. The crowd gathered on the White House lawn was buzzing. For a brief stretch, the fight seemed to be unfolding exactly as predicted. But then things shifted. The first turning point came when Gaethje opened a cut above Topuria's eye early in the round. From that point on, Topuria stopped fighting with the calm precision of a surgeon and started fighting like a man racing against the clock, desperate to finish things within 3 rounds. The composure that had carried him through fights with Volkanovski and Holloway was the first thing to slip away, and he never managed to get it back. Topuria kept up the pressure into the second round, landing repeated shots to the body, and one of them finally dropped Gaethje to the canvas. He went hunting for a submission to close out the fight, trying several different options, but Gaethje managed to fight off each attempt. The second turning point arrived through a costly decision in round 2. Topuria did manage to create an opening. A heavy body shot folded Gaethje and sent the interim champion down to the mat. With a clearly winnable ground position right in front of him, Topuria chose to chase a submission instead. He climbed onto Gaethje's back, searched for the choke, and let the clock run down before Gaethje was able to recover. There were roughly 90 seconds where simply staying on top and unloading strikes would likely have finished the fight. Instead, Topuria gambled on a cleaner finish and came away with nothing. That moment became the hinge point, the single decision that ended up costing Topuria everything. The fight swung heavily in Gaethje's favor during the third round. He connected with a clean right hand that dropped Topuria to the canvas and immediately went for a choke to try to finish the fight. Gaethje couldn't put Topuria away inside the cage, but he beat his face to pieces. That right hand swelled Topuria's face up so badly that a doctor had to step in and check on him. By the start of the fourth round, the damage on Topuria's face was bad enough that the doctor came close to stopping the fight right there. Topuria still fought hard in round 4, and you could argue he even won that second-to-last round, but one of his own cornermen threw in the towel as the swelling kept getting worse. According to ESPN's Andreas Hale, there was a bone visibly out of place on the right side of Topuria's face, and at the moment the fight was stopped, Gaethje was ahead 39-37 on every judge's scorecard. The new champion did a backflip off the octagon. The crowd erupted into pure chaos. Gaethje, who had already held the interim lightweight title twice before, had finally won the undisputed belt that had slipped through his fingers for so long. And within hours, the real fight began. Not inside the cage this time, but across comment sections, in press rooms, and on Joe Rogan's podcast. He quit on the stool. He quit twice. I beat him twice. What more do I have to do? My next opponent can't be him. He should go fight Paddy or somebody like that. Those were Gaethje's exact words. Hardly the speech of a gracious new champion. It wasn't meant to calm things down, and the MMA world reacted exactly as you'd expect. It blew up. To understand why Gaethje came out swinging like that, you need to rewind a bit. Because this fight was never just about the belt. There was real, simmering hatred between these two men long before they ever stepped onto that South Lawn. What had been billed as a lightweight unification bout at the White House had turned into something much messier, a personal feud that had built up between the two headliners. Ilia Topuria and Justin Gaethje each pointed fingers at the other for crossing lines and dragging their families into it. Like a lot of feuds, this one started with a promo video. Topuria lit the fuse on Gaethje's anger with a promotional clip showing him laying a white rose on top of Gaethje's casket. For a fighter like Gaethje, someone who has always admitted that his fighting style could one day get him seriously hurt or worse in the cage, that image landed differently than ordinary trash talk. It didn't feel like just another stunt. It felt personal, and it felt intentional. Gaethje hit back, and he hit back hard. Things heated up even more after Gaethje sat down for an interview with Fox Sports. He said, "I'd have left him too. There's no way I'd put up with his nonsense." Gaethje later insisted he wasn't talking about Topuria's very public divorce, claiming he was simply commenting on Topuria's ego in general. Still, the meaning came through loud and clear to Topuria. Topuria and his ex-wife, Georgina Usadegui, had split in August 2025 following a messy legal fight. During that process, Usadegui had filed a complaint alleging domestic abuse and asked for a large financial settlement. Topuria firmly denied those claims, calling them an attempt at financial extortion. The case wrapped up in January, when she dropped the lawsuit and the two officially finalized their divorce, agreeing to share custody of their daughter. That was the wound Gaethje had just reopened. Whether he meant to or not, the damage was already done. For Topuria, that was crossing a line. "What happens between my ex-wife and me is our business," he said. "We may not be together anymore, but she's still the mother of my daughter. To anyone out there insulting her or talking about things they don't actually understand, show some respect." Gaethje's reply wasn't really an apology. He shot back, "How did that have anything to do with his family? I just said he's annoying. I wouldn't want to be in the same room as the guy. I get why anybody would walk away from him." And by anybody, he meant a friend, a wife, a girlfriend, a manager, a coach. He's talking about himself. That's a slow-burning, deliberately aimed jab. Gaethje wasn't shouting any of this. He was quietly tearing down the image Topuria had built over years, the fearless, untouchable, almost godlike champion who had started believing his own legend a bit too much. From where Gaethje stood, it was Topuria who first dragged the family into things, by going after Gaethje's own father. John Ray Gaethje had called Topuria a short guy, exactly the kind of opponent his son thrives against. Word of that got back to Topuria, who vowed to prove Gaethje's father wrong. Then, at the final media event held on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, Topuria actually shoved Gaethje during a face-off. He put his hands on Gaethje right there, pushing the American back during the stare-down, something that left UFC boss Dana White visibly unhappy. Asked about it afterward, Topuria explained his side of the shove. "I just told him not to get any closer, and he said something like, 'What, are you going to hit me?' I said, 'Yeah,' and he kept stepping in anyway." The then-champion added, "I had to push him, because if I actually hit him, he wouldn't be able to show up for the fight." By the time fight night arrived, Gaethje had been calling Topuria an unbearable little b-boy, while Topuria had promised to put Gaethje to sleep in round one. These two men truly despised each other, and that's exactly why everything that followed the fight hit so hard. So when Gaethje came out on top, it wasn't just a belt he won. He won the argument too, and he made sure everyone heard about it. The post-fight press conference stirred things up, but the Real explosion came a few days later, when Gaethje joined Joe Rogan on the Joe Rogan Experience. The newly crowned UFC lightweight champion, Justin Gaethje, used that platform to officially close the door on any rematch with the man he had just taken the title from. Sitting alongside his coach, Trevor Whitman, Gaethje made it plain that he wasn't interested in handing the former champion an immediate second shot. When Rogan brought up the idea of Topuria pushing for a second fight, Gaethje didn't waste words. He kept his answer short and pointed. "No, there's no rematch coming. Topuria can ask all he wants, but he's not getting one. He quit on the stool. He quit twice. I beat him twice. What more am I supposed to do? My next fight can't be against him. He needs to go fight Paddy or somebody like that." There's more going on underneath that statement than it first seems. When Gaethje calls Topuria a quitter, he isn't simply describing a corner throwing in the towel. He's making a judgment about the man's character. He's suggesting that the legendary version of Topuria, the relentless finisher who never flinches, fell apart the moment it actually mattered. Technically, it was the corner that stopped the fight, but in Gaethje's eyes, that decision started with Topuria himself. Gaethje had already made his stance clear back at the post-fight press conference too. "I'd say a rematch is definitely off the table. I made him quit on that stool. I think the scorecards had it 3-1. I won 3 of the 4 rounds." He even compared it to a landslide election, the kind of result that leaves no doubt, all happening right there on the White House lawn. That's a very particular kind of self-belief. Then came the line that really set things off. "I'm honestly a huge fan of this kid, but where does he go from here? It's going to be a long road back. I never had the mindset that he had. I never saw myself as unbeatable or untouchable. I've said it since day one, given how I fight and how unpredictable this sport is, I'm going to get knocked out eventually. I don't want to say anything negative about him. He was a world champion, and I just took my shot and took it from him. But right now, he's the one in the hospital, and I'm not." There's a sharper edge hiding inside that comment. I never had the mindset that he had. What mindset is that, exactly? The belief that you simply cannot lose. The mindset where defeat isn't even part of the equation. Gaethje is suggesting that this kind of absolute self-belief is what really hurts Topuria, and not only in a physical sense, but strategically too. Topuria's past wins had come against grapplers and grappler strikers, fighters whose rhythm he understood well. Gaethje was the first pure pressure fighter with elite cardio that Topuria had ever faced inside the cage. So once the game plan started to crumble, once his eyes swelled shut and the rounds slipped away, there was nothing left to fall back on. No backup plan for a crisis. Just a man fighting purely on instinct, half-blind, trying to push through an experience he had never lived through before. Gaethje did give credit to the former champion's achievements before turning the conversation forward. "I'm honestly a huge fan of this kid, but where does he go from here?" That's not meant as cruelty. It's a genuine question, and right now the entire MMA world is sitting with it. Gaethje wasn't the only one weighing in on what happened to Topuria. Within hours of the fight ending, other major names in the lightweight division were already lining up their reactions. UFC welterweight champion Islam Makhachev and lightweight contender Paddy Pimblett, two men with their own long-running issues with Topuria, had been watching the fight closely. While plenty of people praised Topuria for fighting through 4 brutal rounds, his rivals took the chance to pile on while he was down. Makhachev leaned into scripture, saying, "He who exalts himself will be humbled." There are levels to this game. Congratulations, Justin, you deserve that belt more than anyone. It was a cold, calculated jab, made sharper by the biblical reference. Makhachev had spent months pushing for a super fight against Topuria at 155 pounds, only to be brushed off again and again. Now he was watching the man who kept avoiding him get stopped in round 4. But no one came in harder than Paddy Pimblett. Pimblett had his own personal stake in the storyline, not only because of their existing bad blood, but because of a specific message Topuria had sent when Pimblett lost to Gaethje earlier that year. Back in January, after Gaethje beat Pimblett, Topuria had ripped into him for ruining what many expected to be a huge grudge match between the two lightweights. So when the bell ended round 4 on the White House lawn and Topuria's corner threw in the towel, Pimblett was already locked and loaded. "All you had to do was beat a 38-year-old who had just come off a 5-round war with me," Pimblett wrote in a post on X. "Instead, you quit on your stool like the little nothing you are. I'm a real fighter, I went the full 5 rounds. You're a fake, a pretender. Congratulations, Justin Gaethje. How about a rematch for the undisputed title?" And that tweet was just the start. Watching the fight live on his YouTube channel, Pimblett was even blunter. "You're quitting, Ilya. You little coward, you're quitting, you. You've never had to deal with real adversity in your life, mate, and now that you finally are, you're folding like a little. I went the full 5 rounds with him, biting down on my gum shield and throwing punches right up until the final bell." Then, in a TNT Sports interview that ended up going viral, Pimblett delivered what became one of the most repeated lines from the whole aftermath. "Some people have that fight in them, and some just don't." He argued that when things got tough, Topuria simply gave up. "If my coach told me we were stopping the fight, I'd tell him no, we're not." And the nickname he gave Topuria, Whitney Houston. Right after the fight, the official story was that it was Topuria's corner who made the call to stop it. But after watching the footage himself, Pimblett became convinced that it was actually Topuria who had decided he was done before that final round even started at the White House. To be fair to Pimblett, he believed the corner stoppage was just a convenient excuse. People can say it was his brother who pulled him out, but if my coach told me, "We're stopping it here," I'd say, "No, we're not. We're carrying on. We're getting that last round in." It's that simple. But Pimblett's criticism wasn't only about settling a score, it also served his own agenda. He opened his YouTube reaction video by saying, "I'm going to get past BSD, and then I want that rematch with Justin Gaethje for the undisputed title." His attacks on Topuria weren't purely emotional, they doubled as a career move. Every moment he spent chipping away at Topuria's reputation was also a moment spent building his own case for a title shot, especially with Topuria already being branded a quitter by fighters like Arman Tsarukyan and Islam Makhachev as they weighed in on the shocking result. The end result was that the man who once seemed completely unbeatable had become the main target of jokes across much of the lightweight division's post-fight commentary. While all of that noise was happening, Topuria himself was somewhere else entirely. UFC President Dana White confirmed after Freedom 250 that Topuria had been taken straight to the hospital following the main event. He also said there were no plans to book him for another fight anytime soon. "Ilya's in the hospital, he's pretty beat up," White said. "I'm no doctor, but from the look of his eye, it seems like he's probably dealing with a broken orbital bone. The damage was real, and there was a lot of it." A few days after the fight, his friend Pablo Motos revealed that Topuria was still having trouble opening his eyes properly. Motos told El Hormiguero, "I was with Ilya this morning. He has fractures in his eye socket and his nose. They were treating his wounds this morning, and he still couldn't fully open his eyes yet." A man who had fought 4 rounds essentially unable to see properly, with a broken orbital bone, on the biggest stage combat sports has ever seen. After the loss, fans also noticed that Topuria had quietly removed his unbeaten record of 18 wins and 0 losses from his Instagram bio, quietly marking the end of his perfect career so far. That one small change, deleting a number, hit harder than you'd think. He had worn that record like part of his identity. Now it was simply gone. But when Topuria finally did speak, he didn't shy away from any of it. "Justin, congratulations. You said you'd leave your mark on my face, and you did," Topuria wrote on Instagram. "You took the sight in my right eye in round 1, and by the end of round 2, my left eye too. No excuses. I went into this with one of the best training camps of my career. I showed up sharp, ready, and prepared. Last night belonged to you. That's just how this sport works. Glory and pain go hand in hand. No drama, no excuses, no hiding behind the corner stoppage." He took the loss with no complaints and then immediately turned defiant again. "I'll heal up, I'll rest, and I'll come back stronger, smarter, and even more dangerous," Topuria said. "And make no mistake, this isn't the end of the story between us. We will get our rematch." So there you have it, 2 completely different versions of the same night. Gaethje sees a man who quit, someone who had never truly been tested before, whose image of invincibility was shattered the moment he faced real adversity for the first time. In Gaethje's eyes, Topuria had never been through a genuine dogfight, the kind of 5-round battle where the man who showed up in round 1 is a completely different fighter by round 4. To Gaethje, that's simply the story, and you don't earn a rematch after a story like that. Topuria sees it differently, a man who fought through blindness, broken bones, and constant punishment that nobody should have been able to absorb, and still made it through 4 rounds. A man who, even from a hospital bed, is already looking ahead. His friend said that even days later, with his eyes barely able to open, Topuria was already cracking jokes, talking about summer plans, and telling him, "Champions fall hard when they fall." I'd love for the rematch with Gaethje to happen in Spain. The UFC has never put on an event in Spain, but there had been growing hope that Topuria's reign as champion might eventually change that. That dream is on hold for now, but the hunger for a second chapter clearly hasn't gone anywhere. The people running the UFC are the ones who decide how fight cards get built, not Topuria or Gaethje themselves. They might choose to give someone else they consider ready a crack at Gaethje's title before they ever grant Topuria his rematch. Before any of that can happen, there's a massive event scheduled for July 11th in Las Vegas, with Conor McGregor returning to face Max Holloway in the main event of UFC 329. Everyone will be watching the winner of that fight closely, since it could end up becoming Gaethje's next challenger. Gaethje has several possible opponents lined up as he looks to defend his new title, including Arman Tsarukyan, Charles Oliveira, and Mauricio Ruffi. A rematch with Topuria looks like it's far down that list, if it's even on it at all. What Gaethje pulled off is even more impressive when you remember that he and his team had long hinted he'd retire the next time he ever loses. So the champion now carries his title knowing that any defense could be his last, and that's by his own design. Gaethje has talked about retiring sometime in 2027. This was likely his final shot at becoming undisputed champion. Pulling it off against someone riding as hot a streak as Topuria was, on one of the most unusual fight cards in UFC history, is a moment that changes how his career will be remembered. As for Topuria, he's 29 years old. He's dealing with an orbital fracture that needs time to heal, a once-perfect record that now carries a single loss, and every rival in the division lining up to take their shot at him while he's down. Makhachev, Pimblett, Tsarukyan, they've all been waiting for a moment like this. The man who spent 2 years calling himself the best fighter on the planet, and backing it up with knockout after knockout, now has to rebuild not just his body, but his reputation. So when Gaethje calls him a quitter and refuses to grant the rematch, the new champion is essentially writing the opening chapter of how this era gets remembered. He's shaping Topuria's legacy while holding all the power to define it. That's more than just a defense strategy for his title, it's a statement about exactly who these two men are. The question the entire division is left wrestling with is this: was the man who lost his sight in one eye during round 1, yet kept fighting for 3 more rounds, really a quitter, or was he simply the fighter who finally ran into the one opponent who could turn his greatest strengths, his confidence, his precision, his self-belief, into the exact thing that ended up beating him? Gaethje calls it quitting. Topuria calls it chapter 1 of his comeback. As always, the truth probably sits somewhere in between a man's image of himself and what really happened once the lights went dark in both eyes, with a 5th round that never got the chance to begin. Sources referenced: Justin Gaethje reveals if he'll have an Ilia Topuria rematch after UFC White House win, Bleacher Report. UFC champion Justin Gaethje denies Ilia Topuria rematch on Joe Rogan podcast, Athlon Sports. Justin Gaethje shuts down Ilia Topuria rematch after UFC Freedom 250, Yahoo Sports. Ilia Topuria lost sight in both eyes in TKO loss to Gaethje at UFC White House, Bleacher Report. Ilia Topuria breaks silence after UFC Freedom 250 loss, Sunday Guardian Live. Ilia Topuria eyes rematch with Justin Gaethje after loss at UFC Freedom 250, Yahoo Sports. Gaethje beats Topuria via TKO, injury update, stats, prize money and highlights, Bleacher Report. Justin Gaethje blames Ilia Topuria for sparking family drama, CBS Sports. Justin Gaethje put on red alert after dragging Ilia Topuria's ex-wife into feud, Yahoo Sports. Ilia Topuria, Justin Gaethje forced apart after heated UFC Freedom 250 presser clash, Yahoo Sports MMA. UFC White House results, highlights, CBS Sports. Ilia Topuria breaks silence, Islam Makhachev and Paddy Pimblett mock former champion, CBS Sports. How the Topuria-Gaethje consensus broke at UFC Freedom 250, all the best fights. Paddy Pimblett goes off on quitter Ilia Topuria, Athlon Sports. Paddy Pimblett says Ilia Topuria quit on the stool, middle easy. Paddy Pimblett rips Ilia Topuria, you quit, you little MMA weekly. UFC Freedom 250, Topuria vs. Gaethje, Topology, https://www.topology.com/fightcenter/event/137848, UFC White House.